Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. In this video, I want to talk about the books I read last month. So basically, I have 5 books to talk about, and I'm really happy that I managed to finish 5 books because I had such a weird reading month. I haven't finished anything in the last third of the month, and I was just DNFing books one after the other. So I'm happy that I managed to finish these 5, especially because these are mostly ones I read for the Invisible Cities project. So I get to tick off some of the countries because I'm so behind that project. And I think I'm going to focus on this project also in August. And hopefully I get to catch up as much as possible. So I just have a little bit more wiggle room moving forward to just reading other types of books. And because I have some projects I was thinking about starting, which I keep postponing. But let's get into the 5 books I read, and I'm going to start with the very first one I finished, and that was a book I picked up for Egypt. I picked up Palace Walk by Naguib Mahfouz, which is book 1 in the Cairo trilogy. And this is a Muslim family saga from the beginning of the 1900s in Cairo. And it follows mostly this father figure in this family who is a very, very strict conservative traditionalist man. And really his word is like the law and is like a really patriarchal figure of this family. The very head is like the king of this family. His word is just law and no one can say anything to him, against him, whatever. He's just, everyone is afraid of him. The men, yes, as well, but especially the women. The women's role in this family is to be there to serve the men and just be obedient and servants, basically. So I think for me, why I went into this book and why this was so interesting is because I wanted to see the role of women within this historical period and this context. And I cannot say that I was very surprised, but at the same time, it was hard to read a book where women's roles were so limited and they weren't basically not allowed to leave the house. And especially reading it from a Western perspective in 2021. But yeah, this is set in the beginning of the 1900s, and I guess at that time, this was how some women at least lived in Egypt. I wanted to see a little bit also a difference. I wanted to see a comparison of how other women lived, and I really got a little bit of a glimpse into that, but I don't think it was so diverse, the spectrum of how women lived, that I really get a good sense of whether the way these women lived was the norm. But I do feel like the way women were depicted here was kind of stereotypical, especially within the family, but also outside of it. So there was just the two ends of the spectrum. And you can especially see that when you look at how women, or how this patriarchal figure views women, because he views women as women he respects and women he doesn't respect. And he respects, even though his respect is kind of like, I don't know if I can really call it respect though, because he really treats the women in his family as basically his servants. So his wife is basically his servant, and he doesn't really have a relationship with his daughters. So yeah, but I guess these are the women that he considers his family and that he's there to protect them. But he's really limiting their lives. And there's such a fuss when it comes to women leaving the house. He really doesn't allow that at all. Not even to see dying family members. I don't want to go too much into the plot. But the other spectrum is how he views women who he doesn't respect. Because basically, he doesn't respect women who are outside of his family, because he meets only more or less women who are in, like the entertainment industry, so to speak, singers, dancers, but also kind of women who he has sexual relationships with. And it's like these women he cannot respect because they're open to have sexual relationship with him outside of matrimony. And it's just interesting the way these are two polar opposites and there's nothing in between. So I hope that moving forward in this book, we will see a bit more shades of gray when it comes to women. But I also hope that as we move forward within the timeline, and we will see a bit more influences of maybe feminism in a way, even though maybe that's a far stretch for this country at this time. But I do believe that we should be able to see something like that. And I just want to see how the lives of these women will evolve. It was also really black and white, the way men are depicted in this society. And especially because, it's such a contrast to the way women live, because men are allowed to do everything. And even the most depraved actions are forgiven and explained away with, oh, they're just men, that's the way it is. And it was just hard to read something like that again in 2021. And I just want to see if there will come a bit more consequences to their actions when we move forward in this novel. As you might see, I'm quite intrigued as to see where this goes, especially because we're coming, I guess, into First World War, and then maybe the third book, Second World War. And I'm really interested to see what happens in that context as well. So I will definitely recommend this book if you like historical fiction. And yeah, I think it gave me a great insight into this particular family's life, at least. And it's just to show that it's nice to do projects a bit outside of our comfort zone and read books from different countries. The next book I finished was Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor. So I've read this book for Mexico. And this is a really, really short novel in which we follow different characters in this really small, hidden Mexican village after the murder of the witch in this community. So basically there's a witch who women go to for different potions and superstitious things. And this witch is murdered. And then in each chapter we follow different characters who are somewhat related to this witch, or who have something to do with this witch's death or the circumstances in which this witch died. And then slowly we piece together the death of this witch, the life of this witch, but also the life of the members of this community and the community in general. So this is a very, very hidden Mexican village, a very small one, rife with superstitious belief and just violence and depravity. It feels like the characters and the members of this community are barely hanging on to their last shreds of their humanity. It's just so hard to read it, especially when these characters are kind of reduced to their basis survival and brutal, violent instincts. You find their humanities within these pages, but for the most part, it's just really like unlikable and unreliable characters. And it was just very, 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 very hard to read about. There's just so many trigger warnings when it comes to this book, so you just be aware of that. And I really couldn't read more than a chapter at a time, so it really took me a long time to finish this, even though this is like a little bit above 200 pages, so it's quite a short novel. I can only compare it to one of those weird American movies when you go on a road trip and somehow you end up in this village, which it feels like a Twilight Zone because there's so weird and brutal things happening there. And you're like, where am I? Who are these people? What happened here? And then you end up thinking, why are these people like this? Is it because of the poverty they're in? Or they're really scraping by and there's just not many opportunities offered to them. There's no one they can rely on but on themselves, and they're really selfish when it comes to their survival because I guess there's nothing else for them. They can't trust the authorities because they are the first ones to take advantage of them if possible. So I can recommend this book. Definitely read it if if you can stomach a book like this. But I would definitely recommend you to check out the trigger warnings and just get some information about what this is, because there's just so much brutality in this, and there's so much sadness when it comes to these characters and the situations they're in, and there's just so much injustice being done to these people that yeah, it's just not a happy book. The next book I read was for Vietnam, and it was The Mountain Sing by Nguyen, Phan. So this one follows this family in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. We basically followed two women of the family, the grandmother and the granddaughter. So we have like kind of two timelines. The grandmother's timeline was at the beginning of the war, and then we have the granddaughter's timeline towards the end of the war. So in the beginning, we meet this young woman who has to flee because of the land reform, and when the communism rose to power, all her land and her possessions were taken forcibly. People were getting killed. So she had to flee her village and everything she owes. She had to flee with nothing, with only her children, and she had to go to Hanoi, which is by foot and several hundred kilometers. So it's a really hard journey, which is depicted here. And it was so hard to just see the sacrifices she had to make in order to reach her goal, to reach the city. So because she knew that she has to go there in order to build a new life for herself. So it was really a difficult time to see what happened also in Vietnam during the land reform and during the rise of communism in the north. And then we followed the granddaughter in the 70s-ish, living in Hanoi with her grandmother. And we follow her life in the context of the war, where most of her family members have gone to fight in this war, and we don't really know what's happening to these family members and where all this is going to end. Will they be reunited and such? So it is a really heartbreaking story, and it was really a turbulent time of Vietnam's history, but this is really a hopeful story, and it has a lightness to it. I think that's because of the writing, which makes it an easier read despite the difficult topics. I can see why some people don't like it, because I feel like the language was a bit too simplistic. It almost read like a young adult novel. And I think this is the author's first book. If not first book, then first book written in English. Maybe that's why I felt that the language was a bit too simplistic. But the message of this book is really positive one. So I think from that point of view, I understand that most people really enjoy this book. So I can only recommend it if you like historical fiction. I think it will give you a great insight into Vietnam's recent history. So you might notice a slight change in the picture, me, the background, the lights. It's because this is the next day. Yesterday I was filming Merrily Away and I finished everything, and then when I was editing the video I noticed that yeah, my microphone died. So now I'm back trying to finish the last two books and just hopefully post this video as soon as possible. The next book I finished was The Yacoubian Building by Alaa Aswany, and actually this was my original pick for Egypt. Now out of this and the Palace Walk, I think I would prefer Palace Walk because I think that one worked better for me. So basically in this one we follow the residents of this building called the Yacoubian Building in downtown Cairo, which is now kind of like a rundown area of town. But back in the day when this building was built, this was the part of town where, you know, socialites lived, where the rich live, where there was a bustling nightlife, and it was just, you know, the place to be. Now it's a bit of a crumbly place of town, and also the residents of this building changed a bit, and it's a mixed bag of people living there, not like back in the day when only the super rich were living there. So now we still have rich people living there, but also at the top of the building, like really poor people live. So kind of it feels like this building represents like the whole of Egypt with these different type of people from with different backgrounds, economic, social, and so on, and political as well, and so on and so forth. So this is like a mini Egypt, which is represented within the residents of this building. Now, why this didn't work for me is because I think when I read a book or novel, I prefer it to be like a central line, like a thread, like a plot line, even if it's loose, and to just kind of bind the whole thing together, whereas this didn't really have it. This followed these different people. There was some overlapping between the people, and some of them were connected to each other, but like it felt more or less like a different stories within this building. So the only thing that were kind of tying these people together was this building. And what this book once wanted to do, I think it achieved pretty well, because this wanted to represent and this wanted to describe life in modern Egypt with its variety of different people, and I think it did that. There's like a lot of controversy, or there was a lot of controversy when this book came out, because it talks about sexuality, and apart from that, it talks about political corruption, but also religious extremism. So it feels like this was kind of received. It was received a bit, controversially in Egypt, but at the same time, that controversy in Egypt, I think, was what made this book maybe attractive for an international audience. Anyways, I did like some parts of it, but overall I feel like, as I said, I would have preferred a central plot line, or just more like a cohesive narrative, I would say. So, and as I said, out of the two books, I think I would prefer Palace Walk, and I will definitely continue with that one. And then let's get to the very last one, which was I finally got to it from the library, but it was Transcendent Kingdom by Gyasi. So basically, I knew that I'm gonna pick this one up sooner rather than later after it came out, because I really, really loved the author's debut novel, Homegoing, and I just didn't understand. I still don't understand why people don't like that novel. I think it was phenomenal. So when I heard that this is coming out, I really, really wanted to get to it, and I was pretty sure that I'm gonna enjoy it. But I don't think this is, again, for me in the same way as the Yacoubian building maybe wasn't for me that much. So basically I listened to this, and I think that made it a bit better. But basically in this novel we follow this woman. I think in her 30s, and she is a scientist. So she is doing research on mice in relation to depression and in relation to addiction. And she does this because her brother died of an overdose. So basically her and her family came over from Ghana when she was small, and life in the US was tough on her mother, her parents, and her father didn't really cope with life in the US and left them, and he went back to Ghana, where he actually remarried and formed another family. So they're left to grow up with a mother, and they live in Alabama in a very religious Christian community. And her family, she's also Christian, a really religious person. And throughout this novel, she tries to reconcile what happened with her brother, and tries to find a scientific and a religious way to reconcile that addiction and her mother's depression as well, because her mother is a depressive. She had several episodes of deep depression, I think, throughout her life, adult life in the US. So this is about rumination of her past and her present, and this intermingling of religion and science, and how these two seemingly cannot work together, because how can a scientist be religious? But she is. So basically for me, I'm not a religious person. I grew up as a Catholic, but I'm not religious, so I didn't really feel connected to this story and this character. Also because the narrative was going in and out, present, past, and it was just, it was more like, it felt more like a stream of consciousness type of writing, very introspective and also very, very personal. I don't know how much this is based on the author's life or experiences, but it really, really felt something very personal, and I just couldn't connect to it in the same way as I think many other people do, because seeing reviews of this on Goodreads, a lot of people enjoy this. But I will definitely check out this author's other books, but maybe in the future I will be more careful when researching and maybe just try to stay away if I don't seem to connect this so much to the premise, because I don't really think that I read the premise of this book. So I'm gonna stop now and go and hurry and edit this video so that I can post it hopefully today. And yeah, let me know if you have read any of these books. I was thinking that I read a lot of older books and not so known books, but actually 3 of these came out last year, so you probably heard of them. But let me know if you have read any of these, and especially Transcendent Kingdom. What did you think about it? So I'm gonna stop now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.